Hey guys, Joseph Johnson with Ultimate Athlete Concepts. Haven't put anything out in a little while, but kind of been motivated lately. I've heard a lot of talk and seen some articles and some videos on the 1x20 method developed by Dr. Yessis, who's been my mentor for nearly 30 years. So when the book came out, kind of caught on slowly, I think, and then you started to see some anecdotal evidence with different people of its value, and I think now you probably have seen enough overall, like from many different places to where you can say there's definitely, validity to it. And then I've heard people, writing articles about their experience or, maybe some videos about it. And some mostly positive, I would say, and you get a few negatives in there. But I think there's been misconceptions even by people who are in favor of it and use it. Maybe they're not getting the full value out of it. And then for the ones who disagree with it, we can look at that too. So I want to start off first by the history. So the history of 1x20 really goes back a long ways. Dr. Yessis actually did his doctoral thesis on strength and endurance and how they interacted with each other. That was like in 1958 to 60, I think is when he published that. So that's been a long time, so over 60 years. And there's been other iterations, people saying something similar, but not as coherent and not as part of a progressive kind of organization to improve. So I want to kind of clear up a couple of the misconceptions. So number one, it's been around a long time. I think for the most part, it was Doc's idea generally. All of the people that I know from the Soviet Union, very few of them had used it or even thought that it was plausible in their work. And, so I don't think it had taken any ground over there to my knowledge of any of the scientists there. So I think this is completely an original idea of Dr. Yessis, at least to put it in the way that he has. I mean, obviously rep ranges have been tested over the course of, probably 70 years since, or maybe even longer, but at least 70 years since the Soviet Union got up and running. So, everything has been tried. Now, using it as in a system or how it would progress, that's a different story. So, I hear people say the 1x20 system, and I always kind of shrink at that a little bit. It's not a system. Originally, we didn't call it 1x20 at the time. So what happened actually was, historically, when Doc and I worked together, either when I was the athlete or when we're working with an athlete together, it was just a general preparatory phase. In that phase, we're looking at the 1x20 because it fulfills a lot of the purposes of the GPP. And not only that, but maybe even more so. It fills more than one role. So one is, obviously in the GPP, you want to develop strength, and it does that splendidly compared to anything else. You want to develop good muscular endurance, good capillary density in the muscle tissue. It does that very well. And you'd like to be more injury proof by also creating more blood flow and capillary density to the connective tissue. So you get those done. And lastly, one that maybe gets a little bit overlooked is the ability to ingrain neurological pathways of particular movements that relate to, something on the field or on the court, and an exercise that has direct relation. And I'll go over that in a minute. So when it first came about, Dr. Yessis called me. He said, "Hey, we got to come up with something like some kind of snazzy name for what we are doing." And he says that it was my idea that we call it 1x20. I say it was not my idea. I say it was his idea, and I thought it was stupid at the time. Turns out I was obviously wrong. It was a good idea. I think it's misunderstood because one of the things that you find when you read books, the author will put out, they want to cover the waterfront on the concept, not leave stones unturned. And I think that what sometimes gets missing between when an author writes a book and when you look what he does in practice, there's going to be a disparity because the book is there as this general overall kind of idea, and all the possible applications, even the ones that he never uses, and which is, I think it's true here. So I'm going to tell you exactly the practical application, what Dr. Yes is, how he intended it, and how it's been implemented, and then how it's been misunderstood. And so hopefully being able to do that, I think will clear up some of the misconceptions. I've been with him now, it'll be 30 years next spring, so, and I've been the closest person to him. And one of the things that I've had the good fortune of is it's not just having the books of the people in these areas, but I know them personally and I represent them to the rest of the world. So the conversations I have with them are different than the conversations that other people have with them. I get to kind of look behind the curtain a little bit more, talk to them about how they feel about different specific things, and it definitely gives a deeper kind of understanding of what we're talking about and what we're using. So, back in the beginning, it was just a general preparatory phase thing. Everybody, we didn't know, I didn't know, everybody got strong so fast. I didn't know that wasn't supposed to happen that way as easily, right? And then, after a while, I started to look around, see what other people were doing. I was kind of in a bubble and realized when I started meeting other people in the field that they weren't getting the same result I was getting. But it was still very much underground because the book hadn't been written. So for the first 20 years, the book hadn't been written. So, or close to 20 years. So with that being the case, when the book came out, Doc put more in the book maybe, than what I had been used to using, a few different things. But I want to clear a few things up. One is, a lot of people say, well, this is great for beginners, which is true. It's great for beginners. I've also used it with professional athletes who are above 30 years old, so obviously not novices, at least not in age. I've used it with many different cases and just used it with an Olympic mogul skier not too long ago in the last year with a great result. So that's a misconception, and for multiple reasons. One is, well, maybe a higher level athlete, he won't respond to it. Well, he's going to respond first and foremost to ingraining the neurological pathways. Now, at a low intensity in the 20 rep range, but it's at a higher resistance than it was maybe last year, creating a deeper ingrainment of the motor pathways. So, and it's a reminder tool for the athlete of the technique. Let's say, for example, in running, if you're using specialized exercises for running, it will help to ingrain those neurological pathways and more deeply kind of set the running technique for the athlete. So that's a misconception that it's just for young athletes. It's good all the way through, and this is Doc, what he says. It's good all the way through, and it's going to be a good injury kind of prevention protocol for a professional athlete. In fact, in a lot of times, like if an athlete's in a stressful situation or a season that's kind of stressful, what we might do is have them use this during the season as a preventive tool from getting hurt or just keeping their conditioning at a higher level. And further, this also has a synergism with like running a mile, and doing the 1x20 together will help enhance the athlete's conditioning quite a bit. In that particular stage, which may be 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, depending on the athlete. Sometimes it's shorter, 3 or 4 weeks if it's somebody who's been around for quite a while. But nonetheless, it still gets done. Now, the other thing I've seen, I'll go over this real quickly, is people think it applies to jumps or med ball throws and things like that. It's not the case. It only applies to strength movements. Now, also within that context, the abdominal movements are at 50 reps in general, and then they'll start to kind of come down. But the abdominal stuff will be 50 reps in that 1x20 phase, and then as you go further along, then those reps will come down too. So there is a little bit of a distinction there and a deviation. So keep that in mind. So the set of exercises or the complex that you use, they say 15 to 25. Normally we'll start off with a lot lower than that. I would say 12 to 15 exercises, maybe more sometimes, depends. But yeah, we won't. I would say it'd be pretty unusual to start with 25. That would be quite a bit, to do. And when we do implement it, there's an understanding of like how many reps do you do? Well, there's two different ways. One is doc will say, let's just start at 10 reps and then we'll work our way up to 20 with a particular weight. The one that I've kind of favored and have used more is using 20 right away, but having the failure be like something maybe they could do for 30, so they're not exhausted, right? But then the next workout, okay, we come up and we raise the intensity just a little bit. And we try to raise the resistance in the smallest amount that we have available to us. So, if the squat's going to be 5 pounds. If it's some other exercises like a dumbbell, maybe we can go up by 2.5 pounds. But point being, and on some of the movements like a lateral raise, which is, the muscles are really small and weak, we'll use maybe dumbbells that only go up in 1 pound increments if possible. So you're going up nice and slowly. You're going in with a weight that's something you can definitely handle. And then as you get moving and you do increase the resistance, your movement up through the next levels of resistance will be much smoother because the body adapts easier than if you're really pushing it right off the bat. So I think from my experience has shown that if we start off lower than what the athlete can do and just move through that threshold of what was maximum for them before, we get a nice smooth adaptation and transition all the way up. And normally, the strength will improve session to session pretty much nonstop. In the event that it doesn't, which will happen, if you've been at it for 6, 7, 8 weeks, a lot of times the bench press is normally the first one that'll, stall. With that, basically all you do is just rotate the movement. If you feel like the 20s are still doing a good job, all your other exercises are really moving, especially if the athlete's young, stay with it. Just rotate the movements. So let me also kind of mention that too. If you're under 12 years old, you should only use 1x20 in our estimation. If you're 12 to 14, you're going to mix in maybe some 20s and 14s rep range. If you're above 14, maybe 8s. 8, 14, and 20 could be part of that cycle. So with the 20s becoming a decreasing amount, but not ever going away completely. So it's still ever present, but in the early stages, if you start with someone at 10, they may do it for 2 years straight, and then you're just rotating movements at some plateau. Still going to get great results. The strength numbers are going to be, I haven't seen anyone else keep up with the pace of the strength gains. And with all the different athletes that we work with, we've seen numbers that I just don't see anywhere else. And some of them, and we're not even attempting, some of them have gotten close to world record levels in some of the lifts, and they play basketball or another sport. One of the boys that we had as a 17-year-old got more reps on the 225 test than NFL linebackers, or the NFL combine linebackers from last year. I think the top number they got was 28 in 2022. and he got 29 reps, and having only done one set of everything, and using the 1x20 throughout his younger years. And I've had athletes, just so that to kind of solidify that too. I've had athletes well over a decade consistently training, and they've used the 1x20 every year, and they've used it to good effect, and it still has value. Now, there's another misconception that the 1x20 is only used for general strength or just general preparation. It's true, it is used for that. It's not only used for that. So, and what I'm going to say should make perfect sense. If you're using exercises that have high specificity, and especially when you're teaching them what I just talked about earlier, you're trying to develop the neurological pathways, then obviously you want a low intensity so that the athlete can pick that up and develop that pathway. So 1x20 is great for your specialized exercises, because now they can really focus. It's low intensity. Once again, something they maybe could do for 30, we're going to have them do it for 20. And they can then develop that technique really well, and you'll see them clear that any technical errors up or develop good technique real quickly without you having to labor it very much. So it's not true that it is only general exercises. It is specific exercises used in a particular way so that we can get good value out of them. Because if you try to go the intensity level later, carryover is not as good. But we do see great carryover once the athlete has used the 1x20 and they've used those specific exercises. It really dovetails nicely into the later phases and makes it much easier for them to maintain good technique when the intensity is higher. And then later, then the intensity gets higher with the specialized exercises, and then ultimately you're trying to mimic what actually happens, and that means the contraction, everything, not just the technique of the exercise, but the contraction, range of motion, everything's identical, right? But with this, we're mainly just looking at the technique part. We want to get that cemented in, and then later on we'll worry more about the contraction as the athlete becomes better. Now, let me say this too: the 1x20 is not just like we're just getting stronger and getting ready to train. You are training, because we've seen people go through 1x20 for, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks and report back significant improvements in athletic improvement. And I've seen this in many, many different places with many different athletes. That's been validated, at different institutions in the United States. So I would definitely say, it's not just this general prep. You could, I've watched people use 1x20 for 8 weeks and improve significantly in their athletic ability. Now, qualify that when they're, let's say they're, 5 years into it, 7 years into it. Are they going to get better athletically in that first phase like they did the first one? No, it's the same. But that's like that with any training method. It works. The first year is the greatest year, and then after that it starts to decline. You have to come up with other ideas or other combinations. Now, also on the failure of the exercise, it should be the technical failure. So, and sometimes we'll say, hey, let that go up to 23, 24 reps till you get real confident and solid with it. And then the technique, once you get getting close to technical failure, then we'll call it good, because really we're really focusing on in this particular phase is technical mastery. That's what we're worried about, and getting strong, good strength endurance with that particular exercise. So that is kind of, that's kind of most of what we want to kind of look at. One other thing that's interesting is that the last 4 repetitions in the 1x20, this was told to me by Dr. Bondarchuk, who I would have to presume is an expert on strength in the world. He said the last 4 reps are the same as the first 4 reps when it's to failure. So if it was 90% or something like that, he said those last 4 reps are the same. they induce the same response by the body. So, and I've already seen that result. When with athletes, the cool thing is that they get stronger faster and more seamlessly, and they recover easily. And then later on, when the training gets more intense, because of the capillary density that they've developed, they recover faster. In their training, in between sessions, or even in between exercises. We've seen that be the case as well. Now, with the application of this, obviously, in the very first phases, this is fantastic. It works great. There's nothing even comparable that I've seen. The results have been, remarkable. As time goes on, it's still a useful tool. We still use it every year. And there's times when you have, let's say, an athlete who's coming off maybe a big injury or a surgery. This would be where we would start and probably stay at for quite a while to build up that capillary density around the connective tissue and develop the strength through the ranges of motion that we'd like for the injured or surgical athlete. So it has great application there too. And there's cases like if you have like somebody who's an endurance runner where you could use 2x20, you could expand it out a little bit if that's what you are trying to develop. But for the most part, with athletes who play team sports, which is primarily what most of us deal with, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, stuff like that. For the most part, you're going to see that the 20s kind of cover that range of strength endurance. I think you may need more, if you're running like marathons and you want to be up higher, maybe 1x50, maybe 2x20. There's a bunch of different variations there. I'm not going to go into those right now. But anyway, I wanted to kind of just clear this stuff up because I think that the only way that I'm even aware of this is because I kind of get to look behind the curtain and talk to the scientists myself, and then kind of get a little bit more detail in there. Maybe that wasn't in the book, or maybe that they meant to get through but didn't. And then, there's some misconceptions that get developed. We've certainly seen that, like with Dr. Veroshansky's work with the shock method. His daughter, Natalia, looked through, I forget how many hundreds of videos on YouTube for examples of plyometrics that were correct, and she only saw one. And then I've talked to Dr. Bondarchuk about concepts, that he's had that have been misunderstood, misapplied. Block periodization has been misunderstood and misapplied. The idea behind block periodization, the only reason why it was developed is because it wasn't working with lower level athletes, and yet I see people with high school plans who are calling their schedules, block periodization, when it's exactly who it was not meant for. So it's only meant when the classical model starts to fail, the one that developed by Matveyev, which was excellent and very applicable for the younger athlete and the intermediate athlete. Block periodization came around when it stopped working, and this was when the athlete was already at the elite level, and maybe it wasn't having. They had to kind of hone in on just one target, or maybe two, as training, kind of focuses, and then, take that one segment at a time, but not necessary. And if you have college athletes on down, you don't have a high-level athlete. And if you have pro athletes, you probably, once again, don't have high-level athletes. There's few and far in between. So there's a misconception there too. But I'm not going to labor all that. I just wanted to kind of clear this up. Hopefully this is informative. If you want to put questions in the comments, I'm happy to answer them. Trying to do my best to preserve Doc's legacy, to make sure that these things are properly recorded and that his legacy is given its full weight, because he's one of a few brilliant scientist. People don't realize the brilliance it took for him to put the stuff together that he has, because he didn't have the support in the United States because no one was researching any of this. And further, he didn't have the support of what the guys in the Soviet Union had, which was, all the different scientists working on stuff, researchers that could help. So here he is trying to muddle his way through Russian that he learned as a kid, but he definitely wasn't fluent at, and no support here in the United States at all, and just getting his hands on journals that were originally written in Russian that he had to go to the Library of Congress to read. And he deserves, number one, all the credit for introducing us to the Russian training philosophy, number one. Number two, the thing that's gotten lost further is that he's refined a lot of the things that the Russians did, and he's made them better. His technique analysis has taken that to a different level. Also, the 1x20 also has to. He's perfected some techniques and ideas on how to train low-level athletes better, because the results that we've seen with low-level athletes here in the United States have been better than the results that I've seen from Soviet Union lower-level athletes. I haven't seen any of them come up with the kind of results that we've seen using Doc's approach. So yeah, if you got any questions, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. Any kind of complaints too, that's fine. But anyway, just wanted to let you guys know and kind of clear this up a little bit. Have a great day.